Story 1. It was a normal Tuesday, and I was at the daycare to pick up my daughter. She's 2.5 years old and has Down syndrome. Because of her condition, she can't walk yet, but we're working on it. She goes to daycare twice a week, and she's the only kid in her group who doesn't walk. My little girl weighs about 27 pounds now, and I can't carry her anymore. My shoulder's weak, and I have a lot of joint problems. That's why we use a stroller. The daycare has a special place at the entrance where parents can leave their strollers during the day. It's really helpful. So there I was, showing up at 5 p.m. to get my daughter. As soon as I walked in, I noticed something odd. There was a little boy, maybe 3 or 4 years old, half asleep in a red stroller that looked just like mine. And guess what? My stroller wasn't in its usual spot. I looked around and saw a woman standing nearby. I figured she must be the boy's mom. Me, excuse me, did you borrow that stroller from the storage area? Woman, yes, I did. My son is tired, and I won't need it for long. My car's on the other side of the parking lot, and I don't feel like carrying him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman just took my stroller without asking anyone. Me, I'm sorry, but that's my stroller. I needed to take my daughter home. Woman, oh, it's not a big deal. Why don't you come with me to my car? I'll give it back to you there. Me, no, that's not going to work. I need it now to get my daughter. Woman, come on, it'll only take a few minutes. Me, no, I'm not walking across the parking lot with you. That's my stroller, and I need it now. We were alone in the lobby. All the daycare rooms were behind closed doors. The woman's son was now completely asleep in my stroller. I wasn't about to touch someone else's kid, but this woman wasn't budging either. Suddenly, she started pushing the stroller towards the door. Woman, I won't be long, I promise. That was the last straw. I quickly put my foot on the stroller's brake to stop her from leaving. Me, you're not taking my stroller. Period. I must have looked pretty angry because the woman finally seemed to realize she wasn't going to win this fight. She gave me a nasty look, but she picked up her son and started walking away. Woman, this is ridiculous. I can't believe how selfish some people are. Me selfish? You took my stroller without asking. Woman, it's just a stroller. You could have waited a few minutes. Me, no, I couldn't. My daughter can't walk, and I can't carry her. That's why I need the stroller. Woman, well, you should have said that earlier. Me, I shouldn't have to explain myself. It's my property, and you had no right to take it. The woman kept muttering under her breath as she walked out the door, her son in her arms. I was fuming, but also relieved that I had stood my ground. After she left, I went to get my daughter from her room. The daycare worker noticed I was upset and asked what happened. I told her about the woman taking my stroller, and she was shocked. Daycare worker, that's never happened before. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. Me, it's not your fault. But maybe we need a system to make sure this doesn't happen again. Daycare worker, you're right. I'll talk to the manager about putting name tags on the strollers or something. I thanked her and got my daughter ready to go home. As we were leaving, I couldn't help but shake my head at the whole situation. Who takes someone else's stroller without asking, and then acts like I'm the bad guy for wanting it back? On the way home, I kept thinking about what I could have done differently. Should I have been nicer, more understanding? But then I reminded myself that I had every right to be upset. This woman had taken something that wasn't hers, something I really needed for my daughter. The next time I went to the daycare, I was happy to see they had put name tags on all the strollers in the storage area. It was a small change, but it made me feel better. At least now, there wouldn't be any confusion about which stroller belonged to who. Story 2. I originally tried to post this to a relationship advice forum, but it got taken down because I'm under 18. So, I'm putting it here. I 17, male, have been wanting to leave my toxic house for months, now because my sister 15. Female is the world's #1 drama queen and loves playing the victim card, and my mom always sides with her. Last night, and I won't blame you if you think this sounds unbelievable, I was in the living room eating a cup of cereal when my sister was in the kitchen looking for food. Then, she comes into the living room throwing a fit because she thinks I ate her eggs. She had made enough for all three of us, but I couldn't eat my serving because I had to go to work. I told her to save me some, so I assumed they were mine when I saw a plate in the fridge. She starts complaining to my mom that I'm selfish and all that, and eventually, my mom starts shouting down the stairs, "You need to leave the living room so your sister can get herself something to eat." I said, "Nothing's stopping her. I don't care about her petty complaints. I haven't eaten all day, and I want seconds. I'm not about to come all the way downstairs again for food." Then my mom said, "She can't go downstairs because you'll hit her." Yes, I was upset because I was just trying to eat, and my sister was being a drama queen. Yes, I was yelling because they were upstairs, but I wasn't going to hit her. The last time I hit her, she picked up a broom as a weapon, and I went to disarm her. I'm a martial artist. She stumbled back, hit her head on the wall, and started crying that I hit her. So, of course, I got mad because she always uses the victim card, and Mom always falls for it. I shouted upstairs, "How could you assume I would hit her? I just want to eat." My mom started yelling at me for cussing at her, and I said, "So it's okay for you to accuse me of being violent for no reason. But when I express my frustration, it's crossing the line." "Okay, fine," she replied. "If you don't stop talking to me like that, I'm going to kick you out." Knowing she'd have no income with me being the only one with a job, I laughed and said, "Then go ahead." She said, "Bye," and I left. I'm now crashing on my grandma's couch until my boyfriend can make room for me. She's here as I'm writing this and said basically, "If you leave, you can't keep your Xbox and phone because I paid for them, and you're not taking next month's child support because I need it." She's trying to blackmail me into staying because she knows she's in trouble without me. I'm taking that child support because I need it to buy my own apartment. Also, I checked the local laws, and if you buy something with the intention of it being a gift, it becomes the recipient's property. My best friend knows how to put a lock on the Xbox remotely and has done that, so that's mine. Even if they keep it, it'll be useless. I don't want to go back because I've been fighting for my freedom for months, and now she's handing it to me on a silver platter. But I do want all of my stuff. Any advice? Update. I talked with my boyfriend about the law, and if she keeps my property and my child support, that is property theft, fraud, and failure to provide notice of eviction. I can sue her. I know she can't afford a lawyer because, again, I was the only source of income in the household. So, just threatening to sue with the intention to follow through might be enough to let her know I'm serious. I had to come back until my boyfriend can clean up the room and get things figured out. So I'll be staying at my mom's house for a couple of days. She's serious about keeping my property when legally it's mine, even if she paid for it. So, on the day I move out, I'm going to call the cops to assist me in getting my stuff back. That is my property. One intent of gift. She handed it to me and said it was mine. 2 delivery. Was it delivered in such a way where it's reasonable to assume it's my property? Yes, she handed it directly to me and said, "It's yours." 3 acceptance. Did I accept the gift? Of course, I did. I've been playing games on it for months. So that is my Xbox, and the controller I paid for is definitely mine. On the day I move out, I'm going to get the police to assist me because she thinks I'm just bluffing. I'll keep you updated. Story 3. Background. At that time, I served as a pastor in a Canadian prairie city. The city had several other churches of the same denomination, and once a month, the pastors from these churches would gather for fellowship, sometimes sharing mutual grievances, though in moderation. Additionally, we held an annual Christmas dinner where our spouses joined us, creating a delightful social occasion. Among the pastors, I had developed a close rapport with 3 individuals, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. For the sake of consistency, let's refer to myself as John, although it isn't essential to remember. During one memorable Christmas dinner held in a private room at a local family restaurant, my cell phone, which was still a relatively new gadget at the time, suddenly rang. Excusing myself from the room, I answered the call to hear a female voice introducing herself as a police officer from the regional force. She informed me that my car, which I had parked at the restaurant just a short while ago, had been stolen. Naturally, I felt a surge of concern, anxiety, and a barrage of questions flooded my mind. However, the more I probed for details, the more baffling and convoluted her explanations became. This left me increasingly confused, pacing back and forth in the restaurant lobby, consumed by a growing sense of unease. After several minutes of this bewildering conversation, Matthew, Mark, and Luke emerged from the private room, chuckling heartily. It turned out that they had orchestrated a prank on me and had even managed to involve the assistant manager of the restaurant. They found the whole situation uproarious and were practically splitting their sides with laughter. While I was relieved that my car hadn't actually been stolen, my primary emotion was gratitude rather than anger. I acknowledged their well-executed joke, shared a few laughs, and we all returned to our dinner, enjoying the rest of the evening. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but feel a sense of mischief brewing within me. I resolved that my retaliation would be clever and harmless, causing no harm or financial burden to anyone involved. I wanted to leave them astounded, with the knowledge of being thoroughly outwitted, and I relished the thought of boasting about it for years to come. As a pastor, I had a genuine passion for reading true espionage stories and wartime spy tales, finding the strategies of deception particularly fascinating. Drawing from my extensive readings, I meticulously devised a plan over the course of several weeks. Here's how it all came together. I patiently waited for around 2 months, allowing their memories to fade and any anticipation of revenge to dissipate. Then, assuming the identity of Mr. X, a government official, I composed individual letters inviting Matthew, Mark, and Luke to a confidential consulting luncheon at a prestigious hotel. To add an air of authenticity, I acquired government stationery from one of my congregants, albeit from a different department, as their stationery was being phased out in favor of newer designs. I justified the non-departmental letterhead by explaining that it was a recent appointment for Mr. X. Each letter highlighted a unique aspect of their respective congregations, emphasizing their invaluable pastoral expertise for the luncheon consultation. In a deliberate move, I introduced minor spelling mistakes in their names, creating a slight sense of unfamiliarity on my part, as attention to detail was a characteristic known to some. In each letter, I instructed them to contact my secretary, who happened to be another stay-at-home congregant with a phone number that shared the same exchange as the government buildings where my official supposedly worked. To enhance the authenticity, I arranged for a distinct teen ring to be connected to her phone line. Back then, a teen ring was an additional phone number that had a unique ringtone, which could be added to one's phone bill for a small fee. Naturally, I covered the cost, ensuring that when the secretary received a call with the distinctive ring, she would answer, "This is Mr. X's office," and take their response to the invitation mentioned in the letter. However, the true brilliance of my plan lay in an additional element. I enclosed a photocopy of a supposedly recent news article detailing the activities of the newly appointed official, which corresponded with the background information in their respective letters. To achieve this, I selected an edition of our local newspaper that was at least 2 weeks old, ensuring that any physical copies of that edition had already made their way to recycling. By carefully replicating the font and line spacing used in the local newspaper, I created a fake article, printing it on buff-colored paper. When pasted onto the real page and subsequently copied, the slight difference in brightness between the buff paper and newsprint became virtually imperceptible, a remarkably convincing forgery. Thus, the trap was set. The invitation letters were dispatched, complete with a fabricated newspaper article providing credibility, while the secretary stood by to handle their calls. Much to my satisfaction, Matthew, Mark, and Luke responded positively. They were falling into the trap. The day before the luncheon, I visited the restaurant at the hotel and explained the entire setup to the manager, seeking her permission to proceed. Fortunately, she granted me the green light. On the day of the luncheon, I arrived at the restaurant half an hour early and informed the manager that I would be present but out of sight. I requested her to wait until Matthew, Mark, and Luke were all seated and had been waiting for about 10 minutes before approaching them. Her task was to inform them that Mr. X had called and, unfortunately, had been delayed in a meeting with a high-ranking government official, assuring them that he would join them shortly. The manager executed the plan precisely as I had envisioned. As I extended their wait time to the limits of my own patience, I casually strolled past the restaurant entrance, feigning surprise at seeing the three of them seated there. I approached their table and sat down in the fourth seat, relishing the bewildered expressions on their faces. Their perplexity only intensified when I burst into laughter admittedly, not the most dignified chuckle, and revealed, "By the way, Mr. X isn't coming. In fact, he doesn't even exist. This entire setup was my doing." One of the most satisfying aspects of the whole ordeal was witnessing how seriously they had taken this supposed consultation with the official. Matthew had sought approval from his deacon's board to attend, while Mark had gotten a haircut and prepared a file of materials he believed would be valuable for the discussion on a mutual concern raised by the official. Luke had earnestly prayed for guidance on whether to attend or not. I certainly acknowledge the importance of prayer, a wise practice for any endeavor, and I commend his thorough preparation. Yes, they enjoyed a fairly nice lunch, and no one suffered any harm. Importantly, none of them ever attempted to prank me again. Story 4. Some general backstory. If you're already familiar with what I mean by Topgolf, or are in a hurry, feel free to skip ahead to the cast section. Otherwise, here's a bit of a setup. I've had to edit the name out just in case I ever get the chance to work there again. Just know that I worked there from opening night until I left for college 2 years later. It was a blast, except for the occasional entitled individual. Insert obligatory, native English speaker typing on a laptop message, "Here, get ready for a long one," with a too long, didn't read summary at the bottom. When I was a junior in high school, I got a job at a place called Topgolf. Big shout out to my other rock stars out there. This place was, for lack of a better term, incredibly luxurious. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, imagine a multi-level indoor-outdoor driving range with large targets out on the green that you try to shoot golf balls into. It was equipped with 3 bars, high-tech golf clubs, the most amazing food you could ever imagine. I love to cook and eat, so this was important, and disc jockeys on each floor. I was part of the original crew, hired as the place was being built, and one of the first in my city to experience the Topgolf brand. Every shift felt like a party. The music was always great, and I made so many friends. We were the new toy in the city, and everyone I knew wanted to visit. It was awesome. Hands down, it was my favorite job ever. But that doesn't mean we didn't have our share of difficult customers. I have plenty of stories, but this one has to be one of my favorites, and this isn't the only one where I got spat on. Cast. Me, your friendly neighborhood floating mass of water vapor and dust particles. Entitled guy, a self-important customer. This story takes place during the heat of summer in my first year. My venue, as each Topgolf location is called, was near the beach and always humid. Our opening winter was busy, but the summer brought college students and masses of families looking for a cool drink and some shade. For this particular shift, I worked on the second floor, cleaning tables and occasionally running drinks from the main bar. Each floor had around 30 bays, and each bay was packed to maximum capacity. There were several rules we asked each guest to follow. The most basic and frequently posted was no smoking in the venue, but that didn't really stop smokeless alternatives. Around noon on a Saturday, a guy walks in from outside. He had a skinny build, stood about 5'10", and was carrying a can of chewing tobacco in his hand while wearing a cut-off t-shirt and a Confederate flag cap on his head. I should note this. I'm a stocky, African-American guy who has played football most of my life at primarily white schools, and most of my teammates have been white. I didn't feel threatened by his attire or feel anything toward him other than the same warmth I give to my brothers. They wear similar stuff and have received a fair bit of education on racial matters from me over the years. Although I am not colorblind, I don't label people based on appearance because I know I wouldn't want the same treatment. Just as I was coming out of the staff-only drink station, balancing a tray of cups with ice in one hand and a pitcher of water in the other, without spilling a drop, I might add, the guy sees me and packs a pinch of the chewing tobacco into his jaw. Being myself and not wanting to clean that nasty stuff out of any cups, I set the drinks down at a table and walked over to him. Me smiling, "Hello, sir. Welcome to Top Golf." Entitled guy with a bad attitude, "Can I help you?" Me caught off guard, No. But I see you have some chewing tobacco. Would you like a disposable cup to spit in?" Entitled guy, "No. I think I can manage." Me, "All right, sir. Please, if you do need one, don't hesitate to." The entitled guy cuts me off, looking annoyed. Entitled guy, "Are you done, boy?" This man, in broad daylight with a crowd of people buzzing around, then proceeds to spit on the floor right in front of my feet. Not only did his comment carry an all too familiar racist tone, but his spit landed on my shoes too. I'm pretty sure it's a universal rule that, unless you want to get hit, you don't spit on another man's shoes. At that point, something inside me just snapped. I had never felt so disrespected by a guest, and I prided myself on providing excellent customer service, no matter if the person deserved it or not. Maybe the heat got to me, or maybe I was just fed up with this guy's attitude. Whatever the case, I let my anger speak. I must have looked even taller than my 6'2" frame, because this guy shrank at my voice. Me infuriated and no longer smiling, "I am going to ask you this as calmly as possible. Please, clean your spit off my floor and my shoes." Entitled guy clearly shaken, but still rude, "Isn't that your job?" What? Me, "Sir, if I hit you once, I won't have a job. Then there won't be anything stopping me from teaching you a lesson." Entitled guy, "You can't be serious." I hand him a towel I keep in my back pocket and give him my best customer service smile. Me, "Are you willing to risk that?" The entitled guy gets down and wipes up his tobacco spit, walking off red in the face, muttering racial slurs. The best part of all this is that I didn't receive so much as a complaint after all was said and done. I told my manager, a 30-something guy covered in tattoos and piercings, what had happened just in case the guy said something. I was so worried I'd get fired from such an awesome place, but he just laughed and said, "Serves him right. I'm just glad you didn't hit him, or we would have one heck of a lawsuit to deal with." Story 5. Background. At the time my boyfriend Mark and I met, we also met his ex-friend. We'll just say he's a choosing beggar, we'll call him Dan. He needed a place to stay twice, but revenge comes with the second stay. So BF and I had got our own place. It was really cheap and shabby, but it was ours. We lived quietly and happily. Before we had moved in during a month-long breakup between me and Mark, Dan and Mark hung out a lot. You see, Dan's girlfriend just had a baby and things went sour when she decided that he was definitely not going to be around her child with his sexist and abusive ways. He bragged about beating her and using her for her car. Thankfully, the mom was smart. So one day Mark got a text from Dan, saying he needed to stay for a while, and I regretfully had pity for him and told Mark to say yes. The first time, he slept on the couch, stole our knife and joked around about killing us, told us to obey him, and constantly told my boyfriend to leave me behind my back because I'm fat and ugly. He ate all our food and paid nothing. Mark and I were scared of him, so we just listened. Eventually, Dan left to go stay with another friend of his. I was so glad that he'd stop influencing my boyfriend to abuse me out of fear of Dan and to finally have a quiet house again. A few months later, Dan texted my boyfriend, but we ignored it, so he ended up calling me. I told him to get lost, but he apologized and said he wants to stay to better himself so that he could eventually get rights to his child. Again, I was an idiot and said okay after he wouldn't stop apologizing and begging. So again, he came over. For the first few days, I tolerated his drinking and need for control. But around day 5, Mark asked Dan to clean up his room. I was at work that day, came home to my stuff in the garbage. Needless to say, I was pissed, but again, I didn't do anything. I just grabbed my stuff out. I just started my new job at a fruit and veg shop, so I didn't want to get too stressed about anything. One night, my boyfriend and I had a fight because of Dan, and I left the house, went to the community bathroom and cried. I came back to the house to find my boyfriend being cussed out by Dan about getting rid of me, saying if he couldn't do it, that he'd do it for him. He wanted to kill me. My boyfriend gave Dan the keys and got up and left. I ran in and grabbed my debit card and then ran after my boyfriend. Mark tried to break up with me if I didn't run away to another state with him to get away from Dan. We fought, but I chased him all night, making sure he didn't do anything stupid. I called people, but no one could help at the time. I had an idea. While my boyfriend was crying and hugging me, apologizing for letting everything that happened happen, I thought about what to do to get him out of our house that he was in, probably ruining everything in there. Eventually, I thought about it, and I made Mark come with me to the police station, hoping they could do anything. After waiting and telling them Dan's details, they said we can remove him from the house, but he can come back after you if we don't find a warrant. My boyfriend was backing out, but because Dan had been arrested before, I was praying that at some point they'd find something. Eventually, the cops drove us towards our house as they got a call from the station saying that yes, there was an outstanding warrant for 2 missed court dates. I cried in the car of relief and told the police officers all of the emotional and physical torment I went through and how he abused his ex. The police officer turned to me and gave me a hug. Luckily, these were 2 fun cops. Cop: I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Are you okay? Me: no, I'm done. I don't want him to come back and threaten us anymore. Cop: well, it's 5 m. Let's have some fun. I want you 2 to pull a stunt with me, so there's no way he can tell that you were the ones who let the police know of his whereabouts, and so that we can make sure he doesn't come back. Me: I've been really wanting to get him where it hurts, but I don't have any plans. The cop then came up with a masterpiece of an arrest. Mark was going to go through the window, open the door from the inside, and then we would pretend like we went back and slept for the night. Then we waited until Dan had to pee. Since there was no bathroom inside the place, he had to go outside. Once the police saw him, they let him go inside, and we signaled them through the window, leaving the door unlocked. The cops came running down the hill and into the house with their guns pulled out. Cops: open the door, Dan, we know you're in there. We have a warrant. Open this door right now. Me in a pretend tired and unknowing state. Oh my God, what the hell? The cops busted in while Dan tried to go through the window. They pulled him to the ground, and he ended up getting a blood nose. Dan: what did I do? I didn't do anything. Get off of me. Mark: yeah, what are you doing? What the hell happened? Why in my house? One of the cops winked at me. A neighbor let us know that there was a new resident here, as it was a high-crime area. The police do get notified, but we kept Dan and his identity secret. But Dan did tell one neighbor his full name. Dan: oh what? I'm gonna kill her. She's dead. At this point, I have to hold back the laughter. The cops put him in handcuffs, and he was arrested for the 2 court dates and resisting arrest. The cops then fake yelled at us and warned us about having criminals in our home, but when the other cop put him in the back of the car, the cop, who came up with the plan, hugged me and wished that I was satisfied with the revenge. Of course I was. They left and me and my boyfriend got some well-deserved rest. We moved out 3 days later and Dan went to jail for 6 months. He texted us later asking again, to which we lied and said that unfortunately the cops are watching us now. I said he's a jerk for everything he did, to which I just got a few ugly and fat texts. Needless to say, he's gone, and not only did he get some time out for what he's done, but is paying off a hefty fine as well. Sweet, sweet revenge. Story 6. In my first job, I worked in it as an access and permissions administrator at a large company with significant technological debt. The environment included custom software dating back to the Windows 9X and even DOS era. Initially, the work was quite tedious, involving a lot of back-and-forth communication between multiple departments. We had to ensure that each employee had the necessary training and documentation to access data in the scope requested by their manager. Additionally, we needed approval from the manager of the department related to the system role in question. On top of that, the company's excessive paper-only bureaucratic workflow made the work go at a snail's pace. A single SAP account for a blue-collar worker required at least 3 forms signed by different people. The heads of departments responsible for signing those papers didn't feel any urgency to send them to us quickly. A good example of this is when I, myself, waited over 2 weeks after being hired in the IT department before my first account was set up. Until then, I only had a guest account that allowed me to access the main internal website with the company's procedures, regulations, and other basic information. Up to this point, each signed form had to be physically delivered to us, which was agonizingly slow given that the company had multiple branches. We decided to automate away the paperwork. Our first step was to allow the use of scanned documents. It was a partial success. While it eliminated the courier delays, management still required us to sign the physical copies afterward, which we mass-stamped at the end of each month. The next step was to introduce a fully electronic workflow. We faced significant resistance from upper management, so we had to settle on a system that mostly replicated the existing paper processes. Despite this, it was a game changer. We created presets that managers could select and customize as needed, using data from these customizations to create better-fitting presets. We also developed workflows that automatically generated and assigned subtickets for necessary approvals and tracked how long it took, sending reminders if needed. And finally, we got an approval from HR to access layoff data to generate user block removal tickets. Sometime after we rolled out the new system, the HR payroll manager made a big fuss. She was furious that her team was still waiting weeks to get their permissions and questioned whether all our work had been for nothing. That really struck a chord with me. Inside, I was overjoyed, but I did my best to keep a neutral expression. At that time, we were working on summary reports with burn-down and bottleneck charts, and I already knew that tickets requesting HR payroll access were spending over most of their lifespan waiting for her or one of her sub-managers to approve them. The manager immediately went on the defensive, claiming she couldn't keep up with the amount of tickets. She then requested a change. She wanted any request from her employee to be automatically approved within the relevant scope of their sub-department. For example, a request for an HR worker to have full HR access and limited payroll access would be automatically approved for HR access, but not for payroll, and vice versa. I was skeptical, but weren't exactly in a position to argue. I asked my boss to join the discussion and explained that the goal was to prevent overly permissive approvals that could lead to unauthorized access. I tried to convince her to brainstorm together potential edge cases before making a blanket approval, but she was already set on her decision and wasn't interested in discussing details. My boss shrugged and said it would be her responsibility. He told her to write up an official document outlining the change, and we would proceed with the implementation. The only request we had was to include a line that each such request would still be created, assigned to as normal and marked as automatically approved by name of the main HR payroll manager decision. I uploaded the scan into our system and, anticipating that it would eventually backfire, made a photocopy to keep it handy in the top drawer of my desk. The original copy went to the archive. A few weeks later, she stormed into our room. The speed with which she flung open the door made it clear she was furious. She demanded to know why we had granted full access to payroll data to her subordinate. I think it was the only time I ever heard anyone yell in the company. I calmly reminded her of her request to automatically approve in-department access requests. She wasn't having it, explaining that one of her low-ranking subordinates from the payroll sub-department had accessed the salaries of everyone in their department, including managers, and was unhappy with the paycheck disparity. Isn't that obvious that they shouldn't be able to do that? Well, yeah, to a human, but that decision was automated away by your request. I handed her a copy of the document she had signed, which instructed us to automatically approve any and all such tickets without exception. Immediately afterward, she asked us to roll back the change while she wrote up another document to cancel the previous one. In the following days, she meticulously reviewed all those tickets and requested us to reduce access for several users. I have to admit, she did a thorough job and kept up a good pace in reviewing new requests, doing it daily instead of once every week or two as before. In the end, we managed to distill a subset of permissions that could be approved automatically and proceeded to implement a similar approach with other departments. P.S. I don't know whether that payroll employee managed to get the raise, but I'm sure they weren't fired, as we didn't receive any tickets to block or remove any accounts from that department in the following months.